Greetings and welcome to the Halloween edition of the Sliders Review. And I'm here today to talk to you about Van Helsing Season 1. So this show came back out in 2016 and it lasted for 5 seasons and ended in 2021. And it came out on the Sci-Fi Channel. And I remember years ago, I watched it when it came out. I was lucky enough to watch it because this is when I started getting back in the TV show and watching stuff and getting apps and all this other crap, and I was curious to find like something fun to watch, something good to watch, right? So I'm all like, okay, I'll check out what's on Sci-Fi Channel because I normally don't watch nothing on Sci-Fi Channel. And so they talked about how they had this vampire show coming out. I'm like, oh, that's cool, vampires and stuff like that, you know. It's been a while since I saw like a good vampire anything, you know. And so like I looked at the picture and there's this woman holding a skull and it's called Van Helsing. I'm like, Van Helsing. I'm like, oh wait, that was that movie Hugh Jackman was in. And Abraham Van Helsing. So I'm like, oh, okay, so they must have like gender bent her and stuff. And because that was around the time, you know, a lot of TV shows and movies started gender bending like characters. But no, actually, this is based off of a graphic novel. And I had no idea. In fact, after the show ended in 2021, I think it was 2022, is when I found out it was based on a graphic novel and everything. So I never knew. Because when watching this show, the first season, it's clear they ripped off The Walking Dead. Because this thing doesn't look anything like the comic. In fact, it's so far removed from the graphic novel, you can't even say it's really based off that. But when I say they ripped off The Walking Dead, boy, I mean they ripped off The Walking Dead. Even to the point where characters are similar to that of The Walking Dead Season 1. Like, they didn't even try to hide it. Basically, this is a post-apocalyptic show where vampires have taken over and humans are scattered around the world trying to hide from the vampires. And it has that Walking Dead like format and feel and vibe and everything, all the way down to like, you know, the type of clothes they wear and stuff like that. It is insane how they ripped off The Walking Dead. Now, I will do comparisons to like characters and like towards the end of this video, I will then give spoilers to the rest of the seasons. Cause I don't know when I'll finish rewatching this series because like you can find all 5 seasons on Netflix and I don't do Netflix. We don't get along, but you can you can find the first season free on Tubi and Freeview and everything, but you can find it on Tubi. And I was shocked and surprised that they had the first season on Tubi because this show's been on Netflix for like the longest time. And you know Netflix don't like to give up nothing. So I am hoping if enough people watch the first season, then like they'll put the rest of the seasons on there. Now, I really do enjoy this show until it started to suck. The first 3 seasons are pretty good. It's the last 2 seasons, however, was just terrible. And the reason for that is because the main actress, Kelly Overton, who plays Van Helsing, Vanessa Van Helsing, she got pregnant and had to be taken off the show. However, and then she didn't show back up until like midway towards the end of the 5th season. And you felt the absence. And they tried to fill it with 2 new characters, but it just didn't feel the same. We wanted like Kelly and everything. However, this is what's really interesting. Now, when Kelly did come back, she had a new hair color, magical powers, and all this other weird crap, which is weird because this show really, cause when she went away, she had brown hair, came back, she had blonde, and she didn't have magical powers. When I say this show jumped the gun, it kind of did and kind of didn't, and there's a reason for that. However, Kelly did say when she was pregnant, she still wanted to do the show. She just wanted to be a gunslinging pregnant mother and everything, but they would not let her. After she gave birth, for whatever reason, they still didn't let her come back. And so I just really hate season 4 and 5. Now, when I say it jumped the gun, but not really, see, this is the reason why. Well, this is based off a graphic novel about vampires and this and that, right? But when the show took that whole Walking Dead format, they kept it very realistic. Basically, the vampires in here, yeah, they are supernatural and everything, but you don't really find that out until many seasons later. It takes a very realistic approach, a very scientific approach, a very, like, spaghetti western type approach. Then when you get into season 2, it starts to take on its supernatural roots, similar to that of the comic. And when they take their supernatural roots, season 2 feels a bit like Blade, the movie series. Then season 3 really starts to get more into the supernatural, and it starts to feel a bit more like Buffy. Then when you get to seasons 4 and 5, it's a combination of The Walking Dead, Buffy, and Blade. So yeah, this show really never had its true own identity, and maybe it would have benefited if it would have just straight up take it from the comic. But The Walking Dead was really hot at that time, and everybody was trying to cash in on it and trying to make replicas and stuff. Even some adult films. That's how big The Walking Dead was. And so yeah, you feel that bit of a disconnect. Like when it starts to go too much into the supernatural route, then you kind of feel like, well, this is not what I invested in. This is not how it started off. So it's just up in the air of how you feel and everything. And so basically what this is about a woman named Vanessa Stewart. And so she is comatose in the first episode. A vampire bites her, he throws up and turns human. And that was really intrigued me and everything. And I'm glad they started it off that way, because I've never seen that before, where a vampire bites a human and they turn back human. Now, eventually she will wake up, and we get some glimpses into her backstory, but we really get glimpses in other seasons. And so I really like the pacing in the first about 5 or 6 episodes. It starts to get kind of slow in the middle, but it speeds back up towards the end. There is a lot to take in this season with only 13 episodes that are an hour. They try to jam as much stuff in there as possible to give it some vampire lore and some Walking Deadness. And I felt like they should have spaced it out a little bit more for other seasons. Like, do the whole survivor thing, living in a hospital away from vampires. Do that in season 1. Get more into the different gang and fractions of the vampires, and then the the resistance, instead of trying to cram that in. Now the resistance and all them will show back up in other seasons, but it would have been nice if they would have mentioned them, but we didn't have to see them in season 1. And so I do like the pacing format to some point of the first season, like how they started it off. They started it off with her getting bit. Then we see our characters in season 1, and then in the second episode they are like, well, how did this happen? So then we get a flashback of her being walking around and all this other crap, and the vampires taking over. And then it goes back into episode 3 where she is now woken up and everything, and people trying to figure out what's going on. And the survivor group that lives in the hospital with her, they can't get along. These people cannot get along. It's very much The Walking Dead. It's like a mashup of different personalities, high strong opinions, and they just can't get along. Also, in the mix of this season, there is a murder mystery. There's a murderer who lives within the survivor group, and they don't know who it is. Then, just like in The Walking Dead, the humans are more dangerous than like the vampires at times, because every time they meet a new group of humans, they turn out to be crappy. And it has a Mad Max feel to it at times. And what's interesting, if you watch this show carefully, you will spot out characters, or I should say actors and actresses from the 100. Why? Because they both film in Canada. That's why. So you will see some people you recognize on the 100 pop up on Van Helsing and stuff throughout like the entire series. And you would even catch that dude, what is his name? That dude from The Flash, Todd Kavanaugh or something like that. He appears in one episode. And of course, he's playing like a person with an accent, eccentric, different than who he is. That's just who he is. He's like a character, not method actor, but character actor and stuff. And like, there isn't much action in terms of hand-to-hand combat, but there is every once in a while from that of Vanessa, and it's really cool. Also, this show is extremely bloody. When I say extremely bloody, boy, I am not joking. Every episode has a high amount of blood. Like a lot. Every episode is bloody. It's more bloody than every season of The Walking Dead. And it's just in 13 episodes. When they cut people's neck, boy, it gushes. When they shoot people, boy, it splats. And not only that, when they kill people, there are like tons of blood on the floor from like where the body died at. And then they have to drag the body away. And then you see this big trail of like blood. Then you see people slipping and sliding in the blood. This show is bloody. So if you like that in your vampire stuff, then you're gonna like this. Sadly, however, when it comes to the vampires, I wanted to see more vampire action, more of them chasing them and stuff like that. It does happen, but it's fragmented and stuff. Like, basically, because they have a hard time trying to get into the hospital because one of the characters, who's a Marine, he booby-trapped the entire thing. And so, whenever there is vampire action, it's pretty cool, but it's mostly just gunslinging and stuff. But there is a little bit hand-to-hand combat. But you do want to see the vampires like storm the place, but you don't really get that. Now, there are two different versions of the vampires. There's your typical human-looking vampire who can talk and speak and has a mind. And then there are the other ones called feral. The ferals are more animalistic. They look a bit more zombie looking in the face. And it's because the feral ones, if you turn into a vampire and all you eat are like animals, then you start to act like an animal. But then if you was to drink a human blood, then you would turn more human type vampire. And we'll see that towards the end. Because it is kind of weird how there are these monster looking vampires who act more like dogs. And then there are the more walking around vampires. So you're probably wondering, how exactly did the vampires take over? Well, I explained that when I reviewed one episode of season 4 or 5. I can't remember which one it was. About a year ago. Basically, the vampires have been wanting to do this for a long time, and a volcano exploded. It caused tons of ash to go up in the air, and that was the uprising, which caused many vampires who were just hiding out to be able to walk around in the day. This was the day they took back the world, or the day they took over the world. And so tons of vampires came out in the day and just started biting the crap out of people. Now, 3 years has passed since the uprising. When the uprising first started, that's when Vanessa went into a coma because technically she died. And so like vampires took over, and like 3 years passed and there's still cloudiness in the sky, just not as much. So it causes the vampires to hide during the day. When it gets about late in the afternoon, they can sometimes go out and around shaded areas because there's still crap in the air. The sunlight has not fully came out and everything. Oh, well, it's not fully shown. Trying to think. So, a lot of vampires have to hide out during the day and stuff. So it still has that yellow filter to it and everything. And so the first season does have a group of like survivors. Not everybody's gonna make it. And it's interesting what happens to them in later seasons. And so this group is the group we will stay with for the entirety of the first season. But like I said, a couple of them will drop like flies. And so like the ones that did die pretty early and stuff, I really wanted more from them. Like I really wanted to see what they could bring to the table. But sadly, we will never know. No, when you get towards the end of the last season, we will have a completely different cast because, things will happen to these characters. But let's start getting into these characters. I'll probably get into Vanessa last, the main character. And I'll get into the minor characters first, and I'll just start bopping it around for whoever I want to after that. Let's start with the vampires first. Julius. So Julius is the leader of a fraction of the vampires. Vampires are broken up into different groups, and Julius is one of the most powerful one. However, they all fall to that of Dimitri, who is an ancient vampire who was around way before like the uprising. And so Julius became a vampire about 2 decades before the uprising. And so we see him hiding out, and then when the uprising happened, he just started biting the crap out of people. And so basically he's the lead, and he wants to capture Vanessa in the hospital. And he lives underground in like the sewers and stuff. And so he has his mom being his second in command, known as Mama. But Mama later ends up dying when one of the survivor groups, who is the murderer, turns into that of a vampire. Julius is really big, he is really strong, and like people are terrified of him. He dresses kind of like goth barbarian type, kind of like the people of Hercules and Xena, like that Greek looking clothing they wear in Hercules and Xena, which is kind of weird, and it doesn't explain it because he's not from that time period. But anyway, so even though he's big and powerful, he is scared of that of Dimitri. He has other members in like his group. Like there's this one vampire dude who always is like screaming for some bizarre reason. And it's never implied why exactly he screams, but he does. And so the one dude who like screams, I forget his name. I think it starts with a G. No, Scab, that's it, Scab. Scab is always screaming. And so, like, Scab has a really interesting, like, span throughout the series. I was not expecting him to evolve the way he did. Julius reminds me a little bit of Negan. Dimitri is the head vampire, not the ultimate vampire. That is Dracula. But Dimitri is very powerful. He's been around for centuries, and he's one of the ancients and stuff. He wants to make daywalkers. So he kidnaps this one doctor named Solamenkis or something like that. And he wants to create vampires that can walk around during the day. Because, the uprising is now gone, and they're tired of living inside buildings during the day. And so, like, it turns out that vampire men can have babies, but not the women. So he is tasked, the doctor, with them trying to create vampire children. Every time a vampire child comes out, they're encased in like a sack of like organic matter. I don't know what this is called, but the babies basically die. Now, in another vampire show that's unrelated to this called The Strain, there's one character named, I forget his name, Zach, that's it, Zach. He was a human who was born in a sack similar to this. His mom called it a rare occurrence called a gall baby. I can't find nothing on gall babies if it's that rare or if it's just made up for the show. And so, like, Dimitri wants Vanessa. He knows exactly who Vanessa is, and he reveals to Vanessa, your last name is not Stewart, it's actually Van Helsing. And there are tons of Van Helsings. Y'all are vampire slayers. And there's a reason why you have like these abilities and stuff. He has a sister, and he has like a first in command named Rebecca. Rebecca wants to overthrow him. Now, the guy who plays Dimitri, I had no idea this was him until I read it online. He's the cop guy from Highlander the Raven, which was the spinoff of Highlander the series, which was a spinoff of the Highlander the movies. Dimitri reminds me a little bit of the governor from The Walking Dead. Rebecca. Rebecca is his second in command. And her and Dimitri, they have these like human camps. Basically, they call them farm camps. There's several different kinds. There's one for like elderly and sick people who are used for food. Then the younger people are taken to this other camp where they are either turned into vampires when they grow up, or they're used for food, or they're used for like manual labor or like other little stuff. But there are tons of humans who are basically slaves to them. And so Rebecca, she doesn't want to take orders from Dimitri no more and wants to overthrow him. So she loves banging humans and stuff. But basically Rebecca, she convinces two members of the resistance to fight alongside her and betray her people. So there's one who Shima, who is used as a spy. Then there's Taka, who literally betrays his people and will kill his people and stuff. And basically, she promised Taka, like, an island so that him and his people can live away from the vampires and stuff. Dimitri tells Taka that she lied to you and everything. And basically, that island has been overrun many years ago. And so eventually Taka, I think he dies, I can't remember. But like, yeah, Rebecca is very, very like evil and stuff. She's also the one who turned Dylan into a vampire. So let's get into some of our humans and stuff. Let's get into Brendan. Brendan is the leader of an Idaho survivor group. And so basically they made their way to like where Vanessa and all them live at. And Vanessa saved them and took them back to the hospital. When Vanessa later escaped to go look for her daughter, the Brendan and his group, you think they're nice and everything. They just got saved. And how do they repay them? Well, they start to become very suspicious, very paranoid. And when they find out one of their people has been murdered and that there's a murderer along the hospital survivor group, they take it over. And they cage all the like hospital survivors. And then they tell them plain and simple, like, look, man, we don't want to hurt you, but we will kill you. And we just want to know who killed our friend. So, and then if you don't tell us, we're going to kill you all. Or we're just going to exile y'all and stuff. So they're not very friendly people. And there's a couple of people in his group like Callie and stuff. Callie's just like a little girl, but she's the nicest. I think Catherine is one of them, but she's mean. Catherine just wants to kill them all. But Brendan's more likely to exile them. But anyway, Muhammad, he just confesses, even though he didn't do it, just so he'll leave the rest alone. So when he banished Muhammad from like the hospital, he still wants the rest of the group, and he's debating if he's gonna kill them or not. Basically, when the hospital survivors take over Brendan's group, they exile them. Callie is given the option to stay with the hospital people, but she doesn't want to. She wants to stay with her group. So eventually, some of his group end up dying and stuff, get bit by like vampires and stuff. He makes his way to the resistance, and it's then he's just like, screw it, I'll just take orders. And so he is later shot by Taka when Taka reveals that, yo, I've been betraying all of y'all and stuff. So when it comes to the hospital survivor group, Cynthia is like probably the youngest. She's a teenager. She's not in the show much, and she's very paranoid and just wants to kill Axel, who is the Marine who's been like, booby trapped the entire hospital. Basically, she is the first to go via of the murderer and like the group. And so the group she is with, like, the murderer was part of that group. And so she doesn't do much. She really doesn't say much. But thankfully, the actress did move on to like a show where she actually gets to do stuff called From. I've reviewed the first season of From. Go watch that. And also go watch the show From. It's really good, and it's in its second season. Nicole doesn't really do much in the show. She's super paranoid and always wants to like, not take orders from Axel, and she also wants to kill Flesh, because Flesh used to be a vampire. She also doesn't trust the doc all that much. She's very like, an angry little woman. Basically, when the vampires stormed out of the hospital, she runs out of bullets to the point where she only has one left. When she realizes she can't get saved, she takes her own life, not wanting to be eaten or turn into a vampire. In some ways, she's almost like Andrea from The Walking Dead, but not really. It's kind of hard to like find out who she's compared to The Walking Dead, because she really doesn't do much or is in the show that much. Because who is the one booby trapping like the hospital and been there for 3 years and watching over that of Vanessa's body when she was comatose and keeping the doctor alive, but the doctor was a vampire? That is Axel. He is a Marine, and he is extremely tough. He's the one giving all the orders, but he doesn't always make the right decisions and stuff, and he pisses off nearly everybody in the group. Basically, he's been living in the hospital for 3 years. When the uprising started, he was tasked with bringing Vanessa's body back to the farm. When the vampire started taking over, he tried to protect the people inside it along with Doc. And so, like, Doc got bit by a vampire, and he's been keeping her alive for 3 years, letting her drink his blood. Because like Vanessa is important. His mission is to protect Vanessa. And since Doc is the only person who's been treating on her, he figures at some point he needs to keep her alive in case for whatever reason, like, there's a cure for vampires and, stuff like that. He is devoted to his mission, and he does not leave the hospital. And he has booby trapped the crap out of that hospital. There are blades swinging around. There are like a giant blade that will come out and chop your head if you go near a door that says do not open. There are UV lights everywhere. He has pimped out the ambulance with spikes and blades and everything like that. There's like half the elevator is gone. He put debris there. The other half has like explosives, so in case the vampires come up, they can like be trapped in the rubble. He has booby trapped the crap out of this, and he is not afraid to kill. One of the people he angers is John. One of the survivors that later comes to live with him. Him and John cannot get along for nothing. And it's because, John's all like, my wife is still out there, we need to go get her. And Axel's like, look, ain't nobody leaving this hospital now that y'all are here. I ain't gonna risk no vampires coming in. And as for Vanessa, he tells the group, This woman you see right here does not exist. And he points his rifle at them. He's all like, you saw nothing. Like, he doesn't know what's up with Vanessa. He doesn't know why he has to protect her, but he's gonna follow his mission until the day he dies. He's very like driven and stuff. But when it comes to John's wife, later on we see vampires holding her hostage to get Vanessa. John wanted to give Vanessa over, and Axel decides instead of shooting the vampires, which was a couple of them, he's gonna shoot John's wife because he feels like, there's no hope for her. She's gonna get bit and all this other stuff. So this angers John throughout the rest of the season. Axel is, a man's man type person. When I say he's not afraid to kill, he is not afraid to kill. When Brendan's group took over and he was able to escape, he went on a one-man killing spree, taking out Brendan's people one by one, only leaving like maybe 6 alive and everything. This angers the group. They're like, why did you kill like Brendan's group? And he's like, dude, they was gonna kill us. I saved y'all. Y'all are welcome. When the vampires do eventually take over, like I said, he booby-trapped the crap out of that. They head into the ambulance and they drive off. And so like there they go to like another military base, but he tells them plain and simple, it's not secure. But he knows another place, the farm. Doc knows about the farm because her sister worked there and the farm wanted Vanessa. When he doesn't reveal everything to Vanessa, like her record and stuff like that, she gets pissed when he eventually tells her what was on like her record list and stuff and about her parents and stuff like that. And so she's agitated and she gets upset. Everybody gets upset at this dude. He feels like his only friend now is the Doc. He had another friend, a former Marine. Ted, that's it, Ted. So he hasn't seen Ted in like a couple of days. And when the people are still living in the hospital, Ted is the one who came back with like the survivor groups. Ted made a deal with the vampires to give over Vanessa. So Axel ain't gonna let that fly, and Ted is dead. When they're at the farm and he's talking to Doc, she's pissed because she tells Axel she is not a hero. But Axel's all like, I know you're not. But he didn't know how one of his friends died. Doc is a coward who let him die. She slammed the door on him. And so when they had to go look for this new guy they took into their group, he got bit by a feral vampire. Basically, they had to get out the room because there was radiation everywhere. And so when he was fighting off this vampire dude, a feral one, Doc was scared and debating if she should close the door or not. Axel got through fighting the vampire off, the crawl towards the door, but then the radiation started leaking more and Doc literally closed the door on Axel. He is pissed. He's like, dude, let me in. Like, I'm only like a few feet away. Then the vampire wakes up because he didn't actually die and he starts fighting again with Axel. Doc runs off all scared and we see Axel just get just ripped and bit and stuff. Couple episodes pass and we see what happens to Axel in the last couple of minutes of the season. He has now been turned into a vampire and he escapes the farm and everything. So yeah. When I think of Axel, God, he's probably similar to that of Shane a little bit. Because, he's law enforcement type. He's stern. He becomes the leader of the survivor group, only for Vanessa to later take over. He's not entirely like Shane. He's not a bad person. But remember, Shane didn't start off as a bad person either. But now that he is a vampire, he is bad. I might as well get John out the way. So John is the angry one of the group, and he betrays the group to that of Brendan's group, only for Brendan to betray him and put him in the cage. His wife is dead as a result of Axel and the vampires, and he's pissed. When he meets Susan, he gets drunk and he starts making out with her, and she likes it until he gets too grabby. She tells him to stop, but he won't stop. Vanessa shows up and beats the crap out of him because Susan is Vanessa's friend. Then next thing you know, they start to pin like the murder sprees on him. Because like whenever somebody murders somebody, they choke them and then they cut off the index finger. And so he's telling them like, look, man, I ain't like the killer and stuff like that. So they have Sam go get his bag, and when they bring him back, they see all the fingers in John's bag. He takes Susan hostage only for Vanessa to kill him with a knife. And he is now taken out. But he was framed. John reminds me of Carol's husband from The Walking Dead. Flesh. His real name is Phil, but his last name is Flesh something. So they just call him Flesh. He was just a regular dude and everything until Julius bit him during the uprising. When Julius bit him, he went back to his home and he had a wife and 2 kids. He murdered his 2 kids in front of his wife and let the wife stay alive so that she can suffer in agony. Now, I'm going to spoil something right here, right now. Eventually, he will find his wife in later seasons, and she has a son. I'm not sure if it's his son or not, if she was pregnant. If it's his son and did not die, then they probably retcon that. But she was probably pregnant, or that's probably she got pregnant by somebody else. Anyway, so he is the vampire who infiltrated the hospital and bit Vanessa and turned back human. The next episode, they find him alive and everything and turned back human. He hadn't like, it's weird. Like all he did was bit her and he threw up. She has something in her blood that makes her unique and special. So of course, nobody really trusts him because he used to be a vampire. And they keep thinking he's the one killing people and stuff. Eventually, some of them turn around and they're like, okay, we trust you and everything. But others still don't, like John and that of Nicole. And even Doc don't really trust him. And Susan, even though they used to be vampires themselves. So anyways, when he turns back human, he is actually a very nice guy. And his acting is one of the best out of everybody in the entirety of the series. So, like, he's a very peaceful man, but he walks in his sleep. And that's when he discovered Cynthia's, like, dead body and everything being hung. They thought she killed herself until they saw her index finger missing. So they knew she was murdered. When he meets these group of other survivors, he becomes very spiritual and everything like that, and he joins their group, only to find out that the dude played by Tom Cavanaugh is a really bad man. The man basically has a wife that's a vampire, and the agreement is every time there's a child born, he will give the child to the vampires. The people in the group don't know that. So anyways, after the group splits up, he decides to split from the group and go with the other people, the spiritual people, where he joins the resistance. And that's when he meets up with Brendan and stuff. He has a very, very interesting story arc throughout the entirety of like the series. Who is he based off of in The Walking Dead? You know, honestly, in the first season, I can't really tell you. I don't really know who he'll be based off of. Because there's really no other character really like him. Well, oh man, wait, hold on. Since he's spiritual and everything and a peaceful man, I guess he's like season 2 of Herschel a little bit. Just not angry like Herschel and stuff. Actually, I take that back. Flesh is more like Dale and everything. Doc. So, when it comes to that of Doc, her real name is Sarah, but everybody just calls her Doc. She was a human who tried to treat that of Vanessa when Vanessa was like, you know, slain and everything. Vanessa died. Doc realized that even though she's dead, her blood is acting like it's still alive, and parts of her body is still acting like it's alive. So she's kind of half dead, half alive. So Doc don't know what the heck is going on. She calls her sister, because her sister's like a doctor in the military, and her sister's like, look, I ain't supposed to tell you this because it's classified, but this woman does not exist, and you need to keep it that way. We're gonna send some people to retrieve the body. That's when she meets Axel, and in a cowardly move, when the vampires try to come in the hospital, she let a military man die. Doc is very much a coward and will let you die and everything. She cannot fight and she's scared of the vampires. Well, eventually she does get bit. And when she does, she's a vampire for 3 years. This is when Axel lets her drink his blood so that she will live, because he's hoping that, she can explain something about Vanessa. Eventually, when they find out that Vanessa has the ability to turn back vampires into humans, they send Vanessa in to let Doc bite her. But Doc will not let her. For whatever reason, when Doc is a vampire, she looks feral and she doesn't really talk, but she's been drinking Axel's blood, so she is that of a vampire. Because if Vanessa bites a feral, the feral will die. So, like, Doc won't bite Vanessa because she knows what will happen. So, Vanessa does the most interesting thing I've ever seen in a vampire series. Vanessa bites the doctor, and the doctor turns human. This is weird. So if a vampire bites Vanessa, they turn human. But if Vanessa bites them, they turn human. So it's not necessarily Vanessa's blood they need. Because when you bite somebody, your saliva goes in, and that's how the vampire strain happens. So after knowing this, one would think, hey, why not weaponize Vanessa's DNA? Put it in some dart guns and just start going at it at the vampires. Doc explains, oops, knocked my camera over. It would take too long to make, and not only that, but like, she needs to test out, Vanessa's DNA a whole lot more to see how exactly it works. Screw how it works. Just like use her blood and start shooting vampires. So anyways, while she's there, she's hoping to treat people who are hurt and injured. But when she cuts her finger, she looks at her blood in a very odd way and she licks it. Because, your saliva has things that's supposed to help, like when you're cut and stuff like that. But the way she drinks her blood is weird. It's almost like she still wants to be a vampire, which turns out to be the truth. She betrays her group. After she betrays Axel and leaves him in the farm to die by that feral, when she's at that peaceful group and everything, that religious group, she runs off into the woods to find the vampire who's collecting the babies, and she tells them, I don't want to be human no more. I want to be a vampire. I like being a vampire. Because she's so cowardly and everything. When she was a vampire, she was strong and she didn't have to worry about being bitten or eaten by a vampire. So the vampire lady agrees and bites her. But then something weird happens. Doc does not turn into a vampire. Something in Vanessa's DNA prevents former vampires from turning into a vampire again. So she's trapped being a human and she is pissed and devastated and everything. And it's messed up how she betrayed the group. She has a second chance at life, but she doesn't want it because she's too cowardly. She's a very interesting character and gets more interesting as the series progresses. And when it comes to Vanessa curing people, turning them to humans, not only will they not turn, but something interesting will happen as well, which I'll get into at the end of this video. Doc is more like the Andrea of the group from The Walking Dead. Susan is really good friends with that of Vanessa. It's her next door neighbor. And Susan comes from an abusive relationship with that of her boyfriend. And Vanessa does not like that whenever she sees that and beats her boyfriend up in the apartment. When the uprising happened, I believe Susan helped get Vanessa Child Dylan out of the like apartment when Vanessa died. And so Vanessa eventually, not Vanessa, but Susan eventually gets bit by a vampire and joins Julius' group underground. When Vanessa gets captured and is taken underground, she ends up getting bit by Vanessa and then she turns human again. They escape and they head back to the hospital. Susan has somewhat of like an edgy side to her. She's nice, but she just gets pissy at people a lot and everything. Like she thinks like, Flesh is the one going around killing people. She doesn't like Doc. She keeps talking about y'all used to be vampires. You're probably the one killing people. And they always be all like, well, you used to be a vampire too. So she's always doing that crap, like blaming them for stuff. She's had a really hard childhood. It's later revealed that like, when she goes back to that of her home with like Vanessa and a couple of the others, that like she didn't have the best childhood. She sees her mom's like grave and everything, but she doesn't know where her father is, and she doesn't like her father. And then it's found out her father is a vampire and it's a feral one. So she just straight up kills like her father and everything. And it's revealed he used to touch her when he was little. And I think the mom either didn't know or she did know and just didn't do nothing. So she's had a hard upbringing. Also, it turns out she and Vanessa are like close. They make out and everything in the season. We don't know the full extent to their relationship, but she is our first bisexual character along with Vanessa. But that's as much as bisexualness that will happen to these two. Because Vanessa later on finds a guy and literally starts kissing him in front of Susan. And Susan just kind of like, whatever. But then, like I said before, Susan made out with John. And so, like, Susan, however, comes to an end when she's talking with one of the people from the group, and that person gives her a hug, but then later strangles her and takes her index finger. Susan, she's kind of like Lori of the group a little bit. A little bit of Maggie, a little bit of Lori. No, actually, you know what? I take that back. She's probably a bit, well, she's a combination of Lori, Maggie, and a little bit of Carol. Muhammad. So Muhammad is like a happy-go-lucky kind of guy. He's best friends with Sam, who's deaf, and he's looking for his sister, Shima. And so like he's part of the survival group, and he's really good on surviving on his own. But Muhammad has a hidden agenda, which took me by surprise. So basically, he's looking for his sister. And so when Vanessa wants to look for her daughter, he's like, yo, let's go and everything. And he helps her sneak out. And so, but they can't find her at first. Well, anyways, he is the one who takes the rap for the murder spree and everything. And so, even though he didn't do it. And so when he gets banished from the hospital, he survives on his own. The dude literally finds a parachute hanging in a tree and he sleeps in it so the vampires won't get him. Like, he knows how to survive. When the group busts out the hospital and the ambulance and everything, he's happy and excited, only to realize, crap, y'all left me. So he starts to follow and everything. But he starts to hear bells and then he gets lost when he goes in a different direction and he meets a woman in like the woods. This woman is part of that spiritual group, that religious group I told you about. It's weird because when she sees two vampires, she's totally okay with that. And he's all like, yo, they're vampires. But anyway, so to help Muhammad, she runs off. But then he runs off after her. Well, Muhammad eventually gets sick and they have to take care of him at that little spiritual group. It is there, but he has no idea his group is there until Sam finds him. And so, like, Muhammad is still trying to convince that of, like, Vanessa, like, look, man, we have to go and look for your daughter and look for my sister. But Vanessa's all like, what if they're in Detroit with the rest of the resistance group? But he believes that they're at, like, one of those, like, human farms and stuff. So he takes Vanessa there, and when he goes there, he betrays her. See, one interesting thing happened. When Muhammad got banished, he took out a picture of somebody who's all like, I will find you. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, must be Shima, his sister. No, it's a picture of Vanessa. Where the heck did he get that from? So that's a weird mystery that happens in the middle of like the season. And then it's revealed he's been working for Dimitri this whole time to find Vanessa and bring her back to him. And so he literally betrayed her. And I could not believe that, man. Like, that was so low down. But he did it just so he can be with his sister. However, his allegiance changes because his sister is a spy for the vampires and helps betray the resistance. He's not happy with that, even though he betrayed his people and stuff. And so, like, he helps Vanessa escape by giving her like a scalpel and stuff. And so he's not happy with his sister at all because his sister's all like, look at us, man. We have a nice room. We have food. We're treated good by the vampires. All we gotta do is whatever they want. But he's not for that crap. And yeah, I can't believe he betrayed Vanessa and stuff. Now he does have an interesting journey throughout the rest of like the series and stuff. And when I think about it, he's more like Glenn. He's young, he's like preppy in there, not preppy, but like peppy, like like pepper and stuff like that. Like he has an upbeat like feel to him and stuff, very similar to Glenn. They both can survive, and they're both young and a little slightly wild. Like they have their wild moment at one point in the series. Shima reminds me a little bit of Beth. Sam. So, Sam is a deaf character in the show. The actor is not really deaf, but he plays a deaf character. I truly thought this man was deaf, but he can still speak. You know how some deaf people can still speak? It's just their voice sounds like odd and everything. So his is like that. And Sam is a extremely good actor. I can't think of the actor's name. Oh, it's Christopher Heidendahl. He is a very good actor. I've seen him in a couple of stuff. And so like he carries a baseball bat around to kill like vampires and stuff. He's very tall, he's very strong. And he's a very nice guy. Until he does something kind of odd. When he rescues Muhammad from the spiritual people, he takes a knife and he just stabs like this one man in the chest in a very crazed kind of way. And then I think he starts to choke that man, which really upsets Muhammad. Now remember, Sam is the one who went to go get John's bag and they found all the fingers in there. There's a reason for that. When Vanessa, Susan, and Muhammad went back to Susan's house, Sam decided to shave off his beard and cut his head bald, giving him a completely different appearance. And when he did that, I recognized him. He played Fear in R.L. Stein's The Haunting Hour. He also played a vampire in Chapelwaite. Let's see, something else. I think he was on Smallville, I believe, as one of the Lex Luthors. I can't remember exactly. But the dude's such a good actor, I want him to play the Joker. Anyway, Sam is the murderer. He's the one choking people and taking their index finger. When Susan was talking to him in the woods, he gave her a hug a little too tightly. Then very slowly and very casually, he just puts his hands around her throat and he chokes the life out of her. Then he takes her index finger. It's so eerie and spine-tingling because he does it in a very cavalier kind of way with this kind of smile on his face. So he is the one murdering people. But why exactly? Now, when Muhammad got banished, he literally told Brendan, I did it. I'm the one who did it. But nobody believed him because he is the deaf guy and everything. But he was actually confessing. See, he has a strong bond with Muhammad. That's his best friend. When Muhammad was like starving one day, surviving on his own, Sam found him and fed him and stuff. So when it's revealed he is the killer, Vanessa wants to kill him, but Muhammad will not let him. And he's all like, he doesn't know why he kills people. He's been doing it since he was a kid. Like, oh my God. So she literally tells Sam, dude, close your eyes because you about to get plugged and everything. But Muhammad will not let that happen. So instead, Vanessa just cuts his ankles and everything and leaves him for the vampires. Well, it happens, and a vampire finds him. A feral vampire bites the crap out of him. Well, actually, the feral vampire was going to eat him. But Sam is very smart. So what he does is he stabs the vampire in the head, and as the vampire is still alive a little bit, he lets the vampire bite his hand. This causes Sam to turn. And Sam goes, like, first, he goes and tries to kill, like, Vanessa and Muhammad. But first, he goes and he finds Susan's dead body that's been buried to drink her blood. After that, he goes looking for Muhammad and wanting revenge on Vanessa. And, yeah, so he's, like, pursuing and hunting him. And so they eventually lose him by crossing, like, a lake or a river or something. I think it was a river. And because he's scared of water. When he was a child, he was almost drowned. So after that, of losing their scent and everything, he later starts to eat like animals in the wood, and he almost starts to turn feral until Julia's group finds him, and then he's given human blood. He's the one who killed Julia's mom and everything. And so, like, Sam takes an interesting turn throughout the rest of the series. He is one of the best villains I have ever seen in anything. Like, this dude is scary, especially now that he's a vampire, because he still has that slasher tendencies in him. And so, like, yeah. I'll reveal what happens to him at the end of this video. Because when I say he takes an interesting turn, boy, he is insane. Sam's a tough one. I forgot what I said before, but he kind of reminds me now of Mika. Was it Mika or was it Kelly? Whichever one was the killer. Remember those two girls in season 4? They were sisters, and one of them was crazy in the head. He reminds me of her, and he reminds me of that one guy from Fear the Walking Dead, who was the son of that one guy in the lead of season 1. The son that, like, he turned out to be good at first, but then later turned bad, and then went with those group of boys, and then ended up dead. I forget his name. So that leads us to Vanessa herself, Van Helsing. So, Vanessa Stewart, later known as Vanessa Van Helsing, was just a regular old lady living with her daughter in an apartment building. Vanessa does not have a job and is constantly lying to her daughter that she's going on job interviews when she's really giving her blood to like a blood bank so that she can get money and stuff. Trying to give her daughter the best stuff that she can and survive because she doesn't have a job. I think in the comics, she might have been a prostitute. I can't remember. But anyways, in the comics, she looks like this. So yeah, they didn't give her her iconic costume from the comics. And for the better, because it's a little ridiculous and everything. However, I wish they would have done like a Halloween flashback. Then they could have put her in there, but I understand why they didn't. This was around the Me Too movement and everything, and her outfit looks like Zantana, and it exploits her body, and it looks ridiculous, and it would have looked ridiculous on this show with a different like style they took. So after beating up Susan's like boyfriend and everything, at some point, like one of the vampires who stole her blood, the blood bank, turned human. And so, like, he went back to his vampires and they're pissed and they killed his behind. Anyways, Julius now wants this woman, not Julius, but it was Dimitri. He wants this woman who can turn humans, no, turn vampires into humans, because he knows exactly what that means. So he sends this one vampire to get her at her place. They fight. She tells her daughter Dylan to like go hide. And so like when I say they fought, boy, it was a fight. It was a struggle. It wasn't like your choreograph, like hand-to-hand martial arts, stuff like that she will later do in the series. It's a real fight, and it's a real struggle, like a person breaking in the house and trying to kill somebody. It was something to see. It felt too real and everything. Well, eventually, this vampire just eats away at like her stomach, rips her like stuff out, and she's dying. She's bleeding everywhere. Dylan later leaves and everything. So she dies, or so people thought. She gets taken to the hospital. Doc examines her blood and realizes something unusual going on, and that her blood is acting like it's alive when she's been dead for hours. The uprising happens, and Vanessa's in a coma for 3 years. When she wakes up and everything after getting bit by that vampire, she has no idea what's going on. She has no idea what a vampire is, but she just wants to find her daughter, which Axel will not let her. But she's so defiant, she literally tells him, look, I will try to escape this place again and find my daughter. Her and Axel have kind of like this love-hate relationship. And so, like, eventually she does make her way out, only to find Brendan's group, bring them back to the hospital, goes out again, and she gets captured by that of Julius. When she turns Susan, they head back to the hospital, but something happened. A feral vampire bites her in the ankle. This causes her to lose her powers because she has a tooth in her ankle from the vampire. She has super strength ability. She has the ability to regenerate. Like, say she has one person like stabbed her, like what was it? Ted stabbed her in the hand with the knife, and then she literally regenerated like Wolverine in the movies, like within seconds. But when she had that tooth in her, it poisoned her body and she was unable to have her powers. So eventually when the tooth is taken out, she's back to normal and everything. And so, like, she knows nothing of who she is and who, like, her parents and stuff like that. It was pretty much all a lie. So when she does go to, like, the human farm and find out that Muhammad betrayed her and stuff, like, she's furious. And so the doctor and Dimitri's all talking about how you're a Van Helsing and how I knew your great-grandfather, Abraham Van Helsing. And so, like, he talked about how, like, the Van Helsing like bloodline passes through like each generation. Sometimes it skips. And so like Abraham was like a vampire slave, but his twin brother got bit by a vampire, and I think that's how it passed like the genetics through the Van Helsing bloodline. Basically, she's half vampire and stuff. That's why when she bites vampires, they turn back human and stuff. She's humanity's last hope, but she was designed that way and kept in hiding. And so, like, she had no idea. And her mother is still alive, but she had no idea about that either. Dimitri reveals that to her. So basically, she's looking for her daughter, Dylan. She's like the Rick of the group. Eventually, she's the hero of the show. She later takes over the survival group, and she's looking for that of her kid. And so when she's about to kill Rebecca, Rebecca reveals, hey, I got your daughter. And her daughter has been turned into a vampire. And so it just ends. And when I say this rips off The Walking Dead, they even have like corny music at the end playing, similar to how The Walking Dead used to in the first season. Now, to give some spoilers as to what happens in later seasons. Now, when it comes to Dylan, because like I said before, I don't know when I'm going to be reviewing the other seasons and stuff, so I'm just going to spoil everything now that I remember. Dylan, I was surprised that she was turned into a vampire. If she has that Van Helsing bloodline in her, then technically she should never have turned. Well, eventually at the end of season 2, she's rescued and Vanessa bites her. She turns human for a while, but the sunlight kills her for some reason. Why? Because that doctor, whatever his name is, he experimented on her. And it caused her to basically burn up in the sunlight. And, that sucked. I'm like, man, she finally has her daughter. And her daughter is similar to Carl and everything. But anyways, Vanessa has 2 other kids and that she doesn't know about, who are grown adults, who've been grown adults ever since the uprising happened. Not only that, but she has a sister she never knew about and everything. I believe her sister's her twin, but they don't look nothing alike. So basically, it's like this. At some point in time, many years ago, people knew about vampires, and they was afraid that vampires would take over. And they knew about the Van Helsing bloodline and how they can turn vampires back to humans. So they needed a contingency plan. This is when Vanessa and her sister Scarlett comes into play. They kept them separate so that the vampires wouldn't find out about them and kill them off and everything. Scarlett was trained to be like a ninja type person, while Vanessa had a normal life, but eventually, died and went to the hospital. Now, in case Vanessa and her sister died, they needed a contingency plan on a contingency plan. So they extracted the eggs from Vanessa, her, reproductive eggs and stuff. This is what the doctor wanted to do when she was captured at the end of season 1, so they can try to make daywalkers and stuff. So like the 2 eggs they put into 2 different women, a black woman and a Hispanic woman, and they got fertilized by like a regular man. And then these 2 daughters, who are adults, took over for season 4 and 5, and people really don't like these characters. Scarlett ends up dying by season 3. Also, these vampires are not immortal. They can live for about 400 or 500 years and then they die. And so like, what is it? Axel, he eventually turns back human, and he starts a romantic relationship with Scarlett. When Scarlett dies, he hates Vanessa after that. Julius ends up getting bit and turning human and ends up joining the survivor group and everything. We get to meet cannibals and all this other crap. Sam eventually pursues Muhammad for pretty much the entirety of like season 2 and 3. He eventually turns Muhammad into a vampire who gets turned back into a human by Vanessa, and I think Muhammad dies somehow. I can't remember how. Now, when a vampire gets bit by, like, say, Vanessa and turns human, then, like I said before, they can't get turned again, but they're also somewhat immortal. They can get blown up, shot, and all this other stuff, and they won't necessarily die. You have to kill them a specific way. But then the vampires learn to make some type of, like, crap that eventually will kill people who used to be vampires and turn to humans in this orange type mist. Let's see what else. Doc ends up revealing that she's a lesbian, and then towards the end of season 4 and 5, she's only a special guest appearance. And then she goes off with like her girlfriend. She becomes a lot tougher after that. Sam, on the other hand, we get to see more in his backstory, how he turned into a murderer as a kid, how he was an orphan in this religious group and stuff. I think he was with like Catholic nuns or something like that, and they tried to help him, but he was just a murderer. And then he becomes like, I think the 4th vampire. It's kind of like these elders and stuff, a vampire god, and he has horns and all this other stuff by like the 3rd or something like that season. This was really cool and interesting. I was like, oh my god, he was evil before. Now he's even more evil because he's a god. But he eventually ends up dying. And I was pissed because he was literally the best actor. Flesh ends up meeting up with his former wife and like their child. And he rescues them and then they go off. And he leaves by like the fourth season. Um, what else? Oh, Julius ends up dying by the fifth season and everything. There are like these ancient Amazon vampire ladies who dress in like white makeup and all these weird golf clothes, and they are like an elite fighting force. And so Scab joins them, and then one of them, the head one, gets turned into like back into a human, and she joins the rest of the group, and she befriends one of Vanessa's kids. We learn more about like the uprising and how this one vampire dude took the form of like a human man and pretending to be like the father of Vanessa's two kids. What is it? When the Vanessa lady, the actress Kelly, got pregnant, they took her off the show. Apparently, she went into some type of void or nexus or something like that, where she spent the next two seasons only come out with blonde hair and magic powers, and she helped kill Dracula and everything. And she went back into a coma, and it ends with Axel still in the hospital watching over Vanessa's comatose body. So it ended the way it began. Dracula is a female Dracula, and it went super supernatural, and then we get to go back into the past and how she formed and all this other stuff. And she has the ability to shapeshift and like mind control people, and this is when it started to get way too fantasy like and stuff. Who else? Oh, one of the vampire people, whatever, took the form of Susan, so Susan gets to come back in like later seasons, but not as Susan, just as like a vampire. Dimitri eventually dies at the end of season 2. This is when we start going more supernatural route. By season 3, that's when they started to lose me and everything, especially in season 4 and season 5. I think that's everybody. In terms of like big story arcs and like, things like that. Yeah. So this is a really interesting show, and you should really like check it out and everything. It's really cool, it's really bloody, and who doesn't love vampires? It's very different from other vampire stuff you see because it's a combination of other stuff blended in. Buffy, Blade, The Walking Dead. It's quite a shame how they ripped some of those other shows off, but it made for a very entertaining thing. And so the comics, if you ever want to read those, I think it's Zimscope Comics or something like that. I believe that's what it's called. I'm not 100% sure. Yeah, I think it's Zenscope Comics, Entertainment Comics and stuff. And so Neil, is it a boat or Abu? He created this series on Sci-Fi. That wasn't that spooky. All right, well, I shall talk to y'all later. Bye.